I'm Jared McGlocklin. I'm with Citizens Bank and Trust. I'm the Vice President of Branch Development and Strategy, and I oversee our branch system as well as our government guaranteed lending program. So some of these topics are near and dear to me. We're talking about strategic development and investments. But first and foremost, I want to have our panelists introduce themselves. Please tell us who you are, who you're with, and kind of share a little bit about your background and expertise in strategic development and investments. So let's start with Brent on the end there.
Okay, hi, I'm Brent Bueche. I'm the CEO of BBI Architects and Blue Marble. Blue Marble is a development company that we focus right now in warehousing space, from small scale office warehouses to hundreds of thousands of square feet, master planning millions of square feet. BBI Architects is a firm that primarily does restaurant work, to be honest with you. We also design the warehouse spaces. You say that's a strange combination between restaurants and warehouses, but it's really not. It's all about moving the product. It's about product and processes and people flow and how all these products flow through the system, whether it's a pallet of rubber or a chicken that's going to be fried for an order of some sort. It's all about how that process flows. So that, as an architectural firm, we focus on that type of work.
I'm Joe Wydell with Equipment Depot. Equipment Depot are masters of material handling. So anything that comes into our country, from ship to shore, warehouse to your store, and from your store to your customer's door, we are involved in some part of moving that material. So when he plans the warehouse, we put equipment in there to actually facilitate what's going on with it. So my expertise is simply that I do my best to learn as much as I can about what my customers need. Their knowledge is a lot stronger than mine, and I just try to put solutions in place for them.
My name is John Roberts. I'm co-owner and CPA for Attract Accounting Advisors. We do a few things, mainly fractional CFO or controller work, which is another fancy word for accounting consulting. We service customers who need way more than a bookkeeper, but don't have the need or the means to support a full-time accounting staff. Lately, we've been getting into a lot more tax planning and prep for our business owner clients, a lot of which we'll get into later today. And also, to play to the crowd a bit, we do have a subject matter expert on staff, my partner, Armin Michaud. He is a SME in JD Edwards. So all things distribution, manufacturing. We've actually helped some large private equity-backed clients here in town implement and built it from the ground up now twice. So a few different facets there. We also advise on real estate investing, which is a huge tax saving strategy. We'll get into that later. And yeah, second year here, happy to be here.
All right, and so earlier Anna had mentioned about the invention of the double drive-through, so I want to point out that the inventor is on our panel right here. That's Brent Bueche. And I think about inventions, light bulbs are great. Edison did well. We have the iPhone. But when I got a car full of kids that are hungry and I'm at Chick-fil-A, that double drive-through might be the most important invention in my day at that point. So thank you, Brent, for providing us that. Brent, let's talk about some of your designs, and when we talk about what are the most important elements of successful industrial design, especially as opposed to, say, residential, architecture.
Well, one is designing for work purposes and the other one's designing for comfort. So there's really two separate things altogether. If we're going to design a house, I want it to be comfy, cozy, and safe. If I'm going to design a facility, it needs to work. It needs to be efficient, how products come in, how products get distributed within the facility, or however it moves throughout a warehouse, how it comes out on the backside. All of those operational issues need to be addressed. You need to work with the client to make sure that their particular processes are accounted for and they can do it, that those processes are handled the most efficient way as possible.
All right. And by the way, gentlemen, if you go ahead and chime in, I want this to be an open conversation. So if you have something to add to any question that I direct at another panelist, please go ahead and help yourselves. Joe, so obviously when we have those warehouse spaces up and running, they're full of equipment. So tell us a little bit about when you're consulting with a business that's on the verge of making significant investments, what outcomes are you actually trying to achieve for them?
So, number one, you want to make sure you've got a good understanding of the warehouse and what the goals are. There's obviously some KPIs that the customers are looking to achieve and improve on. So, there's so many products out there nowadays, so many new technologies. There's a little bit of AI coming in. There's a lot of bit of AI coming in. Should we implement that? Should we not? How would we support that? Should we go wide and increase our footprint? Should we go up? Can we go up? What kind of, it really depends on what the customer is looking to attain in this new endeavor. From an equipment standpoint, I've got a lot of experts that I have access to, and I do my best to bring in that knowledge. As I ask questions and find out what their purpose is, what their goals are, I don't know all the, I don't know everything. There's so many things going on right now, but I know a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me. So being able to call them in and kind of present the problem and have them come up with a solution and help develop that with the customer is probably our biggest strength.
John, Joe just talked about KPIs and measurables, and I know I've heard you talk enough times to know that that's really a sweet spot for you. So besides, taxes, your business focuses on this fractional CFO offering. What type of measurables do you look at, and do you advise business owners to look at when you go in to consult with them?
Yeah, so KPIs, key performance indicators, obviously huge as your company's trying to gain an edge. We take what's typically should be one page, but sometimes a 3-page P&L, pull out the important key performance indicators that's important to a business owner and put it into a dashboard, real-time data. As long as your accounting software is up to date, our reach reporting software, which is what we implement to present those key performance indicators, is going to be accurate. And where we really find strength and value in is taking the Greek that is accounting and turning it into plain English, right? What are the measures that we need to be tracking that we can correct going forward? And we take what would normally be a 1 to 2 hour monthly review in a financial close process and package that into a 5-minute dashboard review. And so to answer the question of what it is that we're looking at, the first is we need to understand the company's key measurement of production. So for us, accounting firms, it's man hours, it's labor hours. And for many of you, right, you're also talking labor hours and understanding your fixed cost, your variable cost, and your cost as a percentage of revenue. A lot of times we find customers whose margins are getting squeezed, right? Your margins, your revenue, less your direct costs. Your margins are getting squeezed and you don't know why. Well, chances are that your labor costs are higher than you think that they are. And so understanding with the business owner or the decision makers what's important to them and how can we combine the quantitative data that is accounting and combine that with the qualitative data that is production tracking, man hours, trips, etc., and determine what key performance indicators are important and how can we trend them going forward. Because once we can establish a good baseline of key performance indicators, then we start to budget accordingly. So if we think we can improve efficiencies 10%, well, those 10%, that 10% margin is going to go straight to the bottom line because your costs are already covered. So not only are we working with sound, actual financial data, but we're also helping the business owner, the decision maker, forecast the future as well.
John, just a little follow-up. So as a business banker, I work with business owners of businesses of different sizes, different types, all kinds of different business models. And I sometimes see that the opposite of knowing the numbers. Do you just briefly, what do you see when you start working with people? Or are you often introducing that concept of knowing the numbers?
Yeah, great question. So it's the E-myth, right? Are you working in the business or on the business? So many business owners that we work with are the number one producer. They're the number one salesman. They're the number one person on the team who is delivering the product. And they fail to work on that strategy, right, of working on the business and not in it, and then forecasting for the future accordingly. One thing that we found lately a lot of success in is resource planning. So, hey, our company's generating 300, 400, 500K a year to the bottom line in net income. What are we going to do with that net income? We'll talk later, I'm sure, about strategic investments and things of that nature. But does that mean we should start to expand our current workforce? Or do we need to buy a competitor? Or do we need to vertically integrate? I'm not going to sit here and say that Attract knows the answers to all of those questions, but we do work with the owners, and really, it's a dance, right? We're combining your industry knowledge with our knowledge of making the accounting numbers work. We're forecasting future production and things of that nature. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have maybe two choices. The first is to expand, reinvest in your workforce, or do we go buy a competitor? If we go buy a competitor, what are we going to need? Well, we're going to need debt financing. Well, what do you need to get debt financing? Sound actuals. You need sound financial statements that you can give to them at the drop of a hat, them being the banker or the insurance company or any external user of your financials. And so I find so often that folks are so worried about being the number one producer in their company, and that's not sustainable either. Because then you come to a situation where you're aging out, you're near retirement, your kids have no skills, but they want to take over the company, and then they start fighting each other over who gets control. Where if you take yourself out of the day-to-day, you start to delegate, you implement EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, through Traction, which we've self-implemented, and there's an implementer at my table, shameless plug. It's an amazing program that we implement on our team, and we even have key performance indicators for that. And so I realize it's a long-winded answer, but teaching a business owner to be an owner and not an operator is where we really add value.
So key takeaway, if you want bank financing, know your numbers and make sure your documentation is intact. So, all right, speaking of financing, sometimes people are buying real estate. Sometimes they're buying equipment. Brent, let's talk a little bit about supply chain real estate. How does architectural design impact the efficiency and flow of a supply chain within a warehouse or distribution center?
Well, that's a good question. It starts from the ground. Depending on the site you buy, that gives you a certain square footage you can ultimately build in your warehouse. How many trucks do you need parked in the lot? How many dock doors do you need? How many employees do you have? Do you need retention, detention issues? Are there other situations that we have to pull real estate out of the equation that takes away from the actual building square footage? That gets you to the building itself. So once you have that building maximum footprint designed, then you start figuring out, okay, I have to store, 30,000 SKUs. How can we make 30,000 SKUs fit in this space? Are we going to have to go 6 high, 5 high? Where does our stacking needs to occur? Because out of that space, we have to take out the receiving end of it, the delivery side of it. Are you going to be staging on the ground? Are you going to be staging in the racks? There are so many things that have to be considered in order to figure out how much real estate, volumetric real estate you have to deal with when it comes to storing products. ASRS systems are fastly becoming prevalent. The tax situation these days, which I'm sure John's going to talk a bit about, is making them so much more affordable. There are tremendous labor savings, and we all know that labor is an issue. The labor situation is not going to go away until AI starts eating up jobs. So, kind of getting off track here. On the real estate side, we really start with the ground and we figure out the building size, what do we need to get the stuff stored, and we just work it out.
So Brent, you mentioned ASRS. So I'm sure in this room, I believe a lot of people know what that is, but I think there might be some that don't. Can you tell us what ASRS stands for?
Sure. It's Automatic Storage and Retrieval Systems. And this is basically robotics. It can be as simple as having receiving doors, putting product in the rack, and then having these automated robots move the pallets around within the racking. It can move it around 2D, 3D. It does sorting. There's all sorts of things you can do. We can typically increase the capacity of a warehouse roughly 30% over traditional forklifts and where you're moving around stuff around traditionally. So it's not just a storage system. It's also a warehouse management system. So it comes with software, or you can have your own software made, integrated with your software, whatever warehouse management system you're using, so that product is tracked. I mean, you know exactly where that product is in the warehouse. You can go and put your finger on that pallet, even though it might be 100 feet in the air, 10 rows deep. The system knows where it is. The system can work at night to pull that pallet from 10 rows deep, way up in the air, and have it down on ground level, pre-staged for you to load in the truck the next morning, if that's the type of system you want. There's all sorts of systems that you can see. Wayfair certainly uses predominantly ASRS systems. The Amazon distribution facility at the old Cartana Mall site, it's all automated. Most of it's dark. All this stuff works in the dark. So it is a tremendous cost savings from a labor perspective and an operational efficiency perspective. These systems essentially work 24/7, and they never take a break.
And I want to add to that quickly, Jared. If we're talking architecture, so before Attract, I was in the finance department at Epic Piping. My partner, Armand, he's my partner now. He was my boss. He cut his teeth at Sunland, right, a big fabrication shop out in Walker. And when I joined Epic in 2018, the shop tour was a big deal. And what was so nice about that shop in Livingston was that it was built ground up. And you could tell that the welders, like the guys who are doing the work, had a huge amount of input into the design of that new plant. And I think so often with us, with business owners, you are growing, or you're building a new plant, or you're going to try to find a plant to buy because you're in duress. Like you've outgrown where you're at, you're ready to rush that next step. And what we've, I guess, realized over the years is the importance of really getting some solid planning on the front end. For instance, pipe spools, right? You bake 2 pieces of pipe, you got an elbow, real big piece of pipe. Once you weld the elbow on, you can't roll that piece of pipe anymore because, the short arm is going to get in the way. So what they did at Epic is they cut a hole in the foundation so that the spool could be turned around completely. And that just crushed everyone else in terms of efficiencies. And it was a planning method where a welder said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we dug a hole in the foundation so that we could, weld around the entire spool? And so often, though, again, we're coming up on timing. We need to make a big purchase before year end. But that's where resource planning comes into play in terms of architecture and planning for the future of your plant.
I told you these guys were smart. Listen to this. This is a CPA talking about pipe spools. So
I'd like to add to that, Jared. So the knowledge to make a decision to make a big purchase like this, it's obviously a big investment. And so do you just Google it and say, okay, this is good. I think I got everything I want, press a button and order, a $500,000 system or a $200,000 system to make your life more efficient. At Equipment Depot, we become a partner with you to basically do that due diligence and help you through that due diligence so that you are confident in the system you're going to implement. There's a number of things that you can put up against that wall to store parts, and some of it might involve shelving, and that's going to store a certain number of parts, but maybe something like a vertical lift module would be better served and a little bit of automated, but you can put 30,000 parts in the same section that you have. So now you're running a lot more efficiently with your real estate because real estate is so expensive. And to try to expand your current warehouse is so expensive. So is there a way that we can build a better mousetrap within our facility? And if so, how do I learn that information? How do I learn that product in a short period of time, because budget is next month and I got to get it in the budget. And so that's when you call in experts, our collaborators, our integrators, like our EQ Solutions division is, because we've had the experience on multiple occasions with multiple customers solving multiple problems. Because that knowledge from a financial standpoint, from a real estate and a design standpoint, but also from an actual implementation standpoint is very critical, because if you put anything like that into place into your operations and it doesn't work, then you're in a bind. So it's very important to lean on someone who has that knowledge. And I think that's probably the best part of our panel, is that we've all got that experience in different areas. But it's all about helping the customer and making sure that their operations run smoothly.
Joe, I'm going to come right back to you because we talked a little bit about automation and robotics, ASRS, and that kind of represents sort of the pinnacle, I guess, of AI and dark warehouses. But there's a lot of steps between old school and getting to the pinnacle of technology. So what about automation and robotics and with the emerging trends with forklifts, and how are they evolving to kind of integrate the technologies to enhance the supply chain?
So there are forklifts that'll unload trucks autonomously. And so you got, instead of having 5 operators and 1 supervisor running 5 forklifts, you have 1 person running 5 forklifts. And that technology continues to grow. Is that the right solution for your business? Maybe, maybe not. How you implement these things, what you're aware of, will this benefit us? It continues to grow, continues to evolve. But a lot of people pre-COVID, I mean, everything we kind of talk about now is pre-COVID. When anybody would tell us anything about any sort of AI or robots, most of the people were kind of like, man, I don't want to mess with our company. I don't want to mess with our people. We got people raising kids, we got families, and they all rely on us, and we're one big unit. We don't want to implement any of that because we're going to lose jobs. And I think what we're finding is that people are now doing jobs of 4 or 5 people. And so if there's a way that we can take some of those jobs off their plate and have some of this technology come in and allow us to run more efficiently, you don't really change the personnel that you have. You just give them a new assignment. And so they grow as a person, they get to help you grow your operations, and the technology comes in and assists. So it's evolving, but it's definitely something everybody's talking about nowadays.
Well, given the difficulties in workforce coming out of COVID, these are inevitable questions that we have to answer. Brent, wanted to talk to you. Last year at this same conference, we talked about a gap in the market of somewhere 10 million square feet of needed warehouse space between Beaumont and Mobile. That was my takeaway from last year. Given higher interest rates and rising building prices, do you still see investments being made in filling that gap?
Yes, somewhat. It's harder to try to come in and make these deals work from a real estate development standpoint. When I go in and I look at buying a site, putting a building up, even just a basic metal building, I have to, if I'm leasing it, today, the last estimate I did was I needed like $12 a square foot to make my numbers work. Me leasing to you a new warehouse at $12 a square foot, I don't know that those numbers work right now. The demand for warehouse space is still there. I wouldn't know if it's 10 million square feet. I haven't seen an updated study lately, but it's certainly there. But at what cost? I mean, the cost benefit, we're all trying to find that footing right now. A lot of people are choosing to try to reinvest in their existing facilities, going higher, at doing an addition. Whatever creative solution we can come up with to try to add to their existing facilities is what is happening right now. I think moving forward, if people are looking to build warehouse space, now's the time to plan for it, so that when interest rates drop, you're ready to go. It's not, I'm not gonna say it's too late, but if you start waiting to plan until the interest rates drop, you're gonna probably lose 18 months on the market. So having that plan stockpiled, if you will, having your business plan together, you know, kind of knowing where you're gonna go to get your money, knowing where your building might be, it's time to do that sort of thing, whereas it might not be time today to actually start digging.
So, John, got to follow up on that. Obviously, there's some tax advantages to owning your own real estate. We might have some prospective real estate investors in here. Maybe you're thinking that you could be someone that can be part of a warehouse development and be part of filling that gap. So, John, talk to us about the tax advantages of owning that type of real estate.
Sure. 4 ways to make money in real estate: cash flow, debt pay down, you got appreciation on the back end, and then fourth most important to me is tax savings. Tax savings comes all the way in the form of depreciation. Depreciation is a non-cash expense that the IRS allows you to take to reduce your taxable income. A few different ways to get there. You guys are familiar with being able to write off your equipment. A lot of times that's Section 179 depreciation. What's nice about financing equipment or financing the purchase of land, well, not land, but developing on land, purchasing buildings, is the fact that you can finance it. So you come out of pocket maybe 10, 15, 20% down payment. Say you put down $200K on a $1 million asset. Let's say it's, metal building, warehouse. What you're able to do, you guys may have heard of cost segregation before. An engineer is going to go evaluate that building. A normal useful life on a commercial building is 39.5 years. Cost segregated engineer will go in and break that building into different components. It will ascribe a useful life, 5, 10, 15 years to a large amount of that asset. And as a result, especially with recent tax changes, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, with bonus depreciation and things of that nature, you're able to write off essentially 20, sometimes as much as 25% of the value of that building in year one. So 2022 was the last year you could take 100% bonus depreciation. In 2023, you could take 80, then it sunsets to 60 next year, and then to 40. So what that means is, basically, if you bought a building this year, a lot of that asset is going to be ascribed a value or a useful life of 5 to 15 year property. You can write off 80% of that value this year, and then the remaining 20% is going to be straight lined over meaning you divide, if it's a 10-year useful life, you take what's left over, you divide that by 10, and that is your future depreciation expense. So I realize I'm getting into accounting nerd talk here, but what's really important is understanding what that means to you as the business owner, because you are able to generate a huge expense on your tax return that then flows to you individually and saves you on taxes. So in theory, if you're in, let's just say, the 30% tax bracket, and there is no 30%, but it makes for easy math, and you're able to take a $200,000 expense on your business books, essentially you've got 30% of 200K, which is 60 grand in cash that is now in your pocket because you optimize depreciation expense. And so what I would say is, especially in this market, I love what Brent said in terms of getting prepared. There are, I think, a lot of deals to be had of folks from the last couple of years who maybe got in at a low interest rate on a commercial building, and maybe the rents didn't support it at the time. Now that's coming due, right? And the folks who are out there with cash or can actually move into a building where you own or occupy it, that looks much better to banks, right? As opposed to a outside, prospective investment. If you're able to own or operate, there's something else you could do there, and that's called a grouping election. So you take your operating company, because typically real estate investing is passive, okay? Which means that you can only have passive losses that we generate through depreciation. It can only be offset by passive income. However, if you make a grouping election to group the asset that you own with the business that you operate, and you can only do it in the first year, that's why you need a CPA who knows what he's doing. You can group those together and you can unlock those normally passive losses that are depreciation based and have them offset your business income. It's huge. I mean, we had one client, again, not a plug, but one client who saved, their tax bill was $90,000 less than it was last year because we implemented some of these strategies. And so, again, I'm not really afraid of commercial real estate investments at this point not cash flowing, because there's 3 other ways to either make money or get wealthy in the long run, between the tenant paying down your debt or your business paying down your debt, appreciation on the back end because everyone knows real estate's not going down, and then the third is tax savings. And the last thing on tax savings, I know I'm rambling a bit, but all we're doing when we invest in real estate is aligning ourselves with the lawmakers, the policymakers, the lawmakers who set the policy for incentivizing investments in an area. What happens when we invest, when we buy a building? We're adding jobs, we're adding tax base, property tax, sales tax, etc. And so what we do is advise our clients to align ourselves with the folks making the rules in terms of maximizing these depreciation moves.
I appreciate that. All right. Joe, and we're going to come back to some be thinking about tax advantages for the equipment side, but I want to go to Joe, talking about equipment. If I'm a business owner and I have a fleet of forklifts and they're kind of getting long in the tooth, why would I sort of upgrade them all? I guess, what are the difficulties that I'd be facing that could be cured by reinvesting in better equipment?
Since COVID, lead time is probably the number one thing that people are concerned about. Some decisions get made, and if you don't have any knowledge from the industry that you're needing to purchase from, you in October are doing your budget. In November, you make a phone call and you say, look, we want to buy 4 forklifts, need them for January 1st. And so that's not always possible. Definitely needs to be considered. And so relationships help that. Keeping in touch with the folks that support your operations with the equipment helps with that. So that when you're thinking about real estate, when you're thinking about warehouses, and sometimes you can't make a move anywhere, then how can we improve the efficiencies of our own operations? And so is there a way, am I having a problem with parts on my current fleet? Am I going to need to keep my current fleet going longer? Are my parts coming from overseas? Is there a problem trying to get those parts? So when you're thinking about equipment, you need to consider these variables, and you might not even know what you need, but that's where collaboration with someone allows you to be smarter about what your decisions are going to be. But definitely lead time is probably the whole thing. We've even talked about build slots. As a company, we saw the lead times continuing to extend, and what we did is we just started assigning build slots to a truck before a truck was even requested or sold. So I know a lot of people with their current businesses identified these challenges in their supply chains and the delays and said, okay, how can we do this better? How can we have a little bit more thought going towards? So I'm proud of the company I work for because we're doing it internally. And then it's my best teacher are my customers when they tell me what their challenges are. So making investments is a big deal, and sometimes you want to spend the money right now. But if I tell you it's going to be 1.5 years before you can actually cut me a check, that's something you might not be prepared for.
So it sounds like sometimes you got to spend money to make money. If you're you may save money on equipment but pay in downtime, right? So. To that notion, going back on the real estate side, Brent, the increase in construction prices and cost, has that resulted in a higher demand for smaller warehouse units, or in your mind, does building larger structures actually make more sense because of economies of scale?
Depends on your needs. That's going to vary, on a case-by-case basis, individual by individual basis. Obviously, if you have 30,000 SKUs, you're probably, or 30,000 pallets, I should say that. If you have 30,000 pallets, a small building isn't an option for you. However, if you're really looking for a facility to maybe it's more of a repair type facility, less hard storage, dense storage, the smaller option will go. As far as construction costs go, the cost per square foot of building bigger is always going to be cheaper because there's so much volume. When you're looking at a big building, and most buildings, we talk about cost per square foot just as on a generic level. Well, there's so much square footage that's open in a big building that the cost per square foot is less. So smaller buildings are going to cost higher per square footage versus a larger building. And going back to what I originally said, it really just depends on the need of the person needing the space. It certainly is not a one-size-fits-all situation.
John, earlier you kind of making the point with real estate investment that sometimes if the deal is kind of on borderline, that tax advantages might make it much more advantageous. Is there anything similar with equipment purchases?
Yeah, so like we talked about earlier, Section 179 expense is huge for equipment. We actually shared Equipment Depot. Okay. We want to get that wrong. They actually have a really awesome flyer that like works it out perfectly to where, you essentially buy a $100,000 piece of equipment, $21,000 gets put in your pocket from the savings that comes along with that. A lot of times with Section 179 expense, that's also the same rule that folks invoke when you buy a vehicle for more than 6,000 pounds. That's why the 6,000 pound deal is so important when you guys go to buy, your fleet trucks or whatever it may be. The only downside to that is with automobiles and equipment, et cetera, it won't appreciate long term the same way that real estate does, which is why if it ever came down to, equipment or real estate, we'll always go with real estate. Not to mention you could typically get more favorable financing terms on real estate than you can equipment. But it's the oldest trick in the book. I mean, how many of you business owners go buy a ton of stuff at the end of the year and just in order to reap the depreciation expense? And so it's a valuable strategy. The only other thing I'll say about that is you've got to be careful when you're trading in equipment or when you're trading in your vehicles because, on the new asset, you'll be able to write it off, most of the time. Well, if it's over 6,000 pounds, you can write it off 100% that year. But you also have a trade-in value from your old asset. And that trade-in value in your old asset is down to zero because you depreciated it already in a prior year or years. And so you have to be cognizant of the fact that, you're getting the pickup on depreciation expense this year, but you're also now essentially selling that. You're trading that old piece of equipment in. And so you have a gain to recognize there. It's on your tax books as zero, but you traded it in for $100,000, right? So a lot of times the depreciation expense will offset that trade-in value, and a lot of people forget the tax ramifications of that trade-in value. Now, if you're adding to your fleet, that's a different story because you're not trading anything back in. All of that depreciation expense is going to help you this year. But just something to consider as some of you have aging equipment. It might not be as appealing as you thought it would be.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to ask all three of you this question. How important are collaborations and partnerships in the strategic development of supply chain operations? Joe, can you start us on that one?
Yes, well, I'm married to probably one of the best people to introduce and connect folks, and Chris Teffer is one of the second best people I know when it comes to connecting people. We've met with a couple of folks in the industry and customers where we brought together a group of folks that had expertise in various areas that they were interested in, and being able to collaborate with folks and introduce folks to people that, you might have a good relationship with somebody. They ask you a question and you have no ability to help them other than to introduce them to the person that you also know that can help them. And so, oftentimes when I'm sitting down with customers, there's only a few ways that I can really directly help them. But if we have a conversation and learn, and I can collaborate with them on what their needs are, then there's a good chance that I know somebody who knows somebody. So, Chris, you might have mentioned it earlier, I know a guy. My job is to try to know as many guys as possible that know as many guys as possible so that I could be that source for you if you have a challenge or if you have a need. And I think it's invaluable in the world we live in. Today is all about being able to meet other folks, and you might not have any direct need with somebody you've met today, but now you know another person who knows what you do, they know what you do, and so if they like and trust you, maybe they'll be able to come to you for help, and who knows what it becomes down the road.
And yeah, to add to that, I mean, my father owns a millwork distribution company in Metairie, so windows, doors, molding, etc. And when I was like in high school, I asked him, like, what value do you really add? He's a wholesaler, so he buys from the plants or the manufacturer, and then he sells it to the builders. And I said, why don't the builders just go straight, skip your margin that you're marking it up by and go straight to, the manufacturer? And it's the same thing that Joe just said earlier in terms of the expertise that he's able to provide as a consultant. He's way more than a matchmaker of equipment versus someone who needs that equipment. And I think that that's really the value of even events like this, because we understand that he has a load of expertise of designing these racking systems or at least seeing what works and what doesn't work. And, I wouldn't know that someone who was an equipment dealer, like I wouldn't think that deep to think that he could add that much value, into the design of my warehouse or the build out of a new asset. And so all of that to say that, the accountants, the equipment dealers, the operators, the project managers, everyone has to be on the same page within your company and then also up and down your supply chain. And that starts with culture too, right? We talked earlier about instances where your vendor might be reluctant to conform to your ways because it doesn't benefit them specifically. I think if you have that culture to where it's like, I'm not trying to make your job that much more difficult. I just know that this is going to make you and your employees happier in the long run. And once we develop that culture of collaboration and like a mindset of abundance and teamwork and those type of things, it's going to be great for everyone, but especially the end customer.
So I'd say 75% of what I do is collaboration, starting with the clients. I mean, we talk about designing a facility to be able to meet the needs of that particular client. We have to know that client very well. I mean, that calls for some serious, intense collaboration. We need to know basically how everything is going to move through this facility, how it's going to work, what processes have to be followed. That's a very intensive collaboration. That takes a lot of time. Then I have to collaborate with electrical, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, all these other folks that come, every equipment vendor in the world. Joe, I have to talk to people with metal buildings. I have to talk to people with fans and air conditioners and all kinds of other stuff. So collaboration, just like everybody's business here, I bet y'all would all say the exact same thing, that probably 75% of what you do is collaborating, working with people, and just putting it all together to create systems, processes, buildings, whatever it is you're creating that work to the benefit of your company.
All right, well, let's hear it for our terrific panelists.